5 years after Aaron Paley launched the very first Yiddishkayt festival, the New York Times described his achievement as having created, quote, the largest festival in the nation honoring Yiddish, the 1,000-year-old language of the Jews of Eastern Europe. It is a language, and perhaps most important, the New York Times wrote, a culture that is viewed at the festival as unsentimental, vibrant, emotional, and alive. Since then, Yiddishkayt has transformed from a local Los Angeles festival into a full-service cultural and educational organization with local and global programs that broadcast the legacy of Ashkenazic Jewish culture. As many of you on Facebook can attest, we have become the most popular site creating content and programming dealing with Yiddish culture on the internet, and we serve as the home of the Wallace Annenberg Helix Fellowship that brings together scholars and artists to create new work, engaging with the riches of Yiddish cultural life. I'd also like to acknowledge a terrible loss this month. On November 4th, a member of Yiddishkayt's board of directors and our academic advisor, David Schneer, died at the age of 48. David was a pioneering scholar of Jewish history, and he was my dearest friend for 20 years. And this event here today is dedicated to his memory. David and I were both the students of the late Eli Katz, who brought us into the field of Yiddish and was the initial spark who connected us with Yiddishkayt, and in fact, with Aaron Paley, who I'd like to welcome here today. For most of you, Aaron is a man who needs absolutely no introduction. You may know him as Yiddishkayt's founder and visionary, and he is also the president and co-founder of Community Arts Resources, an unparalleled innovator in urban planning, cultural programming, event production, always on the forefront of connecting people and community and place. Aaron not only founded Yiddishkayt, but he also founded Ciclavia, the largest open streets event in the United States, I want to say the world, which transforms the streets of LA into places for people to walk, bike, and socialize and celebrate their own city. And I know Aaron and Michael are going to talk much more about the things in Los Angeles and in the Jewish cultural world that inspired them and continue to inspire them. So without anything further, I'd just like to welcome Aaron Paley. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Rob. And yes, in memory of David. So I am very happy to introduce Michael Alpert, who is also a dear friend of mine for about 30 years now. And Michael is a virtuoso musician, a songwriter, a composer, a U.S. National Heritage Fellow, the founding member of Capella and Brave Old World, and a cultural activist. So Michael Alpert. He's coming, right? There you go. Hey, and Michael is joining us from Scotland, where it's 8 p.m. It's noon here in Los Angeles. And we're going to have a conversation in honor of our 25th anniversary, because Michael was actually one of the first people who I saw performing Yiddish in a way that was contemporary, in a way that was unsentimental, as I said, as the New York Times quoted. And also he gave me, without him knowing it, there was this inspiration watching him on stage and thinking about what Yiddish could be. And so we're going to start actually by showing a very short clip from Michael performing in 1987 on Fifth Avenue in front of the then headquarters of YIVO at 86 and Fifth, which is the Vanderbilt Museum, Vanderbilt House, which is now the Neue Galeria. And it's just so interesting because what I find fantastic about this is bringing Yiddish to the street. So let's just watch this for a minute.
Bis als der Schadchen ist einmal gekommen zu mein Seiden. Dem Taten mit der Mame Maschidach reden. Hat mir gerett enorm sie ist. Dit das Klezmer Maschki hat sich hereingemischt. Zu lieben Maschki ist geworden, der Schilloch geschlossen, der Tati ist geworden, der Mann ist Hosten. Ay, da, ay, da, ay, da, ay, da, ay, da, ay, da, da, ay, 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 da, da. Euer Gedenken.
Thanks. So that there's a couple things there that I just we're going to pick up. And thank you, Robbie, for the introduction. And Michael and I are going to take it from here.
Hey, good to see you, Michael.
Take care, Robbie.
First, it's you're bringing the music onto the streets, and we're going to talk about how we get to 1987 when you do that. But that's about when I meet you, and so that's about what you look like, and your musical charisma, your incredible mastery of the language is all there in this short performance that we saw with you at Capella. But also what really, I think, was one of the things that was motivating me was bringing it out into public, which was, for me, one of the founding ethos of Yiddishkayt was to bring Yiddishkayt, bring Yiddish out of the closet and onto the streets and into the public. So I applaud you for that. And I want to also say that when I met you and when I saw you first performing on stage at the Valley Cities Jewish Community Center and then at Klez Camp West at Camp Swig in California, that was in 1989, I just thought you were a New Yorker. You know, I figured, you know, this guy who's doing great Yiddish music, he's from New York. And at a certain point you said, no, I'm from Los Angeles. And that then became also part of our friendship and our bond. So we're going to start with Los Angeles and growing up here. So I want you to just tell us a little bit about how your family got to LA and what were your Yiddish influences growing up.
Yeah, well, hi there, old friend, and good to see you here today, across all these miles too. Yeah, I've spent a lot of my life being an Angelino playing a New Yorker, or being thought of as a New Yorker by a lot of people. It's like, I'm not really a New Yorker, but I play one in a band, as they say. I did live there for 35 years, so something rubbed off. But in any case, yeah, I mean, the trajectory behind me, some of my backstory in terms of coming into being, is that my father and my whole father's family came from Lithuania when it was still, the late Russian Empire. Came to Boston. So New England is very important in this story too. In 1912, actually, both of my parents were considerably older than a lot of people of our generation. So that's part of that has a great deal to do with who I am and what I do in life. But as far as coming to Los Angeles, my mother, who was actually born in Boston not long after her parents arrived from the old country, from Austria-Hungary, from the Bukovina and Galicia, my mom came to LA in 1919. So when she was 10 years old, and because of my grandfather's asthma. So in many ways, my mother was like an old Angelino, and my father was this, had an immigrant kid, the youngest in his family, who then made his way out to LA after the war so I started with a lot of those, a lot of influences and streams coming together there. And I was born, as we've talked about, in early 1954 in Kaiser Foundation Hospital, as it was called then, on Sunset Boulevard, right, beneath the Hollywood sign. And but so in significant part because of this big generational gap, or rather than a gap, I'd say it's a bridge that makes me in fact a member, a generation older than I hope. anachronistically grew up with Yiddish, speaking Yiddish, not only Yiddish at home, but and more even than in my home, and my whole family and our family circles. First in Los Angeles and then in New England, as we'll get to. But so that's, those were a lot of the kind of historical and cultural factors that came together. By the time I came along, no one in my family was concerned that I wouldn't learn English, for example. And Yiddish was Yiddish, as well as, some Russian and Polish and some other languages relevant to East European Jews were part of my upbringing in LA. And I kind of, for years, I still do. I mean, I love the sort of irony and surprise of saying, it's like, no, I'm actually from LA. And for years, it's like, you're from LA and you speak Yiddish? And I'm like, yes, are you aware that Los Angeles is the third largest Yiddish city? Third largest Jewish city in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the story.
I get that as well. People are, you must be from New York. But you also, your parents sent you to Sholem school. I went to Shula, Kinderschule, but you went to Sholem. And I know that one thing that we share in common is this wonderful song that greets people. So I thought maybe it would be great if you could play Lo Mir Alamin Bagrisen.
Yeah, Lo Mir Alamin Bagrisen. The first, maybe not the first Yiddish song I know, but pretty much the first one that I sang in a public Yiddish context, which was Sholem Sunday School, actually. But, so, and it's a greeting song to everyone. Lo mir alamin bagrisen, oy lo mir alamin bagrisen, lo mir alamin bagrisen, lo mir alamin bagrisen.
And you can adjust that song to greet the elders, the kids, whoever. And for me, I grew up with Sylvia Brown singing that, and that's the anthem. That's like the way to open something up. So, and that's also my childhood too, just hearing that song. Go ahead.
You confirmed for me that, because I've always associated with that song with LA and with my shul, and didn't really hear it very much in New York.
Oh, really?
And then, and you had said to me when we were getting ready for this, you said that was the LA song, that was just what everybody did, and that's that's very interesting to me.
So what's fascinating is how LA, and this is really important for me in Yiddishkayt as well, is how LA shapes you. And I know that you have this LA is a multicultural, diverse city, and the impact and the relationship between Yiddish and other cultures is something that Yiddishkayt has always tried to spotlight. But that's really part of your life, is that, the being open to other cultures and having other cultures seek and soak into you as a person and your musical influences is really interesting. So talk a little bit about how, what you absorbed from Los Angeles's diverse cultures.
Well, in particular, the whole presence of the Mexican world, the Mexican American world, Mexican culture, Mexican music was so important to me, and it remains so to this day. Among many other things. I think of Spanish as a kind of semi-native language. I grew up with as I've said, with a lot of different languages at home and in the family, but Spanish was just always there, always in my ear, and just more than in my ear. And again, my mother, having come to LA very early and then grown up partly in Boyle Heights and then in Highland Park, was very clued into Mexican music and culture too. So very early on, I learned heard from my mother singing things like, some people would know the song Carmen, Carmen, Carmela, and I don't remember the rest of the words, but I used to sing it. But especially songs like De la Sierra Morena, cielito lindo, vienen bajando. Cielito lindo, la cucaracha, which, you know, I always get a kick out of the fact that, like, my mother was the person who turned me on to what marijuana was, because the, you know, it's la cucaracha, ya no quiere caminar porque no tiene, porque le falta marihuana que fumar. And I was, you know, so in hearing that and learning it when I was, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years old from my mother, that's what first hit me to weed. And it goes on and on up to the point, like, by the time I was 8 or 9 years old at the oldest, I was glued to the Spanish language and often literally Mexican radio stations in LA, glued to the music and glued to the language. And that included, you know, my love for it included not only the commonly heard styles like mariachi, but also Mexican regional styles, música jarocha, Veracruz music, la música huasteca with the great fiddle music, and so that's it. That's been a profound, and I'm glued to that stuff to this day here in this little village in Scotland too.
Well, I know that it's so important for you that early on in your career, like in '84, you actually wrote a song mostly in Spanish or all in Spanish about growing up in Los Angeles, Ciudad de mis amores. Could we hear that?
Yeah. This is a world premiere, and I'm gonna try this funny little.
We're gonna try to get. Hold on. We're gonna try technically to get Michael bigger here, not me, on the screen.
Are we hanging on? I'm gonna have a wee.
Okay.
A wee dram in the meantime. Right. Slonchiva. Right. Salud a todos.
And if not, then we'll just keep the parallel. But I'm hoping we can get him bigger.
It feels like we're
yeah,
you know.
We're okay. Then let's just go.
Okay, so this is Ciudad de mis amores. I was actually going to say a brief word about. Well, I'll talk about it afterwards. De San Fernando hasta los cerros de Santa Ana, del Valle Seco hasta las olas del mar. Eres mi tierra de niñez, de nacimiento. Para ti yo voy ahora a cantar. Todas tus palmas, tus naranjas y tus flores se resplendan en mi alma con color. Con punto y coma, con mi pluma y mi guitarra, quiero pintar la dulzura de tu olor. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mis amores. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mi pasión. Ya han pasado muchos años que te llevo grabada en mi corazón. Por tus cañones yo me he mucho divertido, caminándome por tu chaparral. Yo soy hijo de la yuca y del arroyo, porque tú eres mi tierra natal. Hoy me encuentro en cañones de otro tipo, estoy tan lejos de las palmas de Hollywood, pero cañones de argamasa y de vidrio nunca reemplazan los de mi juventud. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mis amores. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mi pasión. Ya han pasado tantos años que te llevo grabada en mi corazón. Aunque no soy hijo de la raza, el castellano sí puedo bien hablar. Ya mi tierra angelina muy querida me has inspirado a este gabacho a cantar. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mis amores. Adiós, adiós, ciudad de mi pasión. Ya han pasado muchos años que te llevo grabada en mi corazón.
I'm clapping for all the hundreds of people who are watching
thanks.
now or later. I was just actually looking at the public comments. It's like there's a lot of people on. So Michael, like, tell me, like, so I know that, you know, as a child, you actually leave Los Angeles, and then, you know, you've kind of been in exile ever since. But tell me what you know, thinking back about your career, what part of LA has stayed with you, and how has that impacted you as you've evolved as a person?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think what has stayed with me is the natural grandeur of Los Angeles. The fact of, and I would say it's also the difference between growing up in the Western United States in contrast to the Eastern United States, or having that be my primal landscape.
The mountains, the ocean.
Yeah. We grew up in spectacular, and you and me. I mean, we grew up, you know, with even though that, you know, a lot of the time we couldn't see it all because of the smog, which is, you know, one wonderful thing about what's happened to LA. You know, what has become of LA in the meantime, but the fact that the air quality is so much better, and not just the quality. I mean, the look of the air, the etc. But the yes, you know, the spectacular mountains, you know, this enormous ocean, you know, the you know, colors, the flowers, the scents in the air, which is a good deal of what that song is about. I was gonna go through.
I forgot. Yeah, we didn't talk about what the meaning of that song is.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, a kind of, I'll just talk about the last verse, which it says, well, the last couple of verses, it says, you know, though I find myself today in canyons of another kind, because the song talks about roaming the canyons and the arroyos, and how I'm also a child of the yucca and of the arroyo. Because I wrote the song when I lived in New York already. Actually, I wrote on the airplane flying back from LA to New York. And it says, though I find myself in canyons of another kind today, and I'm so far from the palms of Hollywood and of LA, canyons of concrete and of glass will never replace those of my youth. And the last verse is, although I'm no soy hijo de la raza, I'm not a child of la raza, still I speak Spanish okay, and you, my beloved Angelino land, have inspired this gabacho, this gringo, to sing. And so that entire heritage, and, you know, it dovetails and just is completely interwoven with the natural landscape for me of Los Angeles. And I think ultimately a love of the natural world in general, which also comes from my family and has to do with New England and has to do with Eastern Europe ultimately, but maybe we'll get to some of that.
Well, we're definitely going to get to that. Actually, it's so interesting, just when you were describing the words of that song, it made me think about Guantanamera and that poet, whose name I forgot, thinking about Cuba and talking about, you know, where donde crecen las palmas. So it's like, I love that you bring these different, you know, I guess I would say your Angelino-ness, you know, is embodied in you, and you take this kind of, I would say this kind of Yiddish, this kind of the confluence of Yiddish and Angelino, which is, you know, looking to different places. It's like having the pastrami burrito, you know, those kinds of things. Like, we're going to put them all together. So maybe we'll just keep finding resonances of that as we follow you on your life's trail, because now you go as a kid to Boston, and then you come back to LA, and you start, I mean, there's this sense of, like, you know, getting in, you know, I don't know, you learn things on the way. So I know that you go to Yugoslavia, you work on your Slavic languages, and then you come back to Los Angeles before coming back to New York for this final chapter. So what are you learning at that point, and what's happening along that point of your life?
Well, a lot of it was involved my move to Boston, and New England, which was when I was 12 years old. So I was on the cusp between childhood and adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, I spent most of my adolescence, my teenage years in New England. What that was about was, it was connected with my parents' divorce, but what it involved was moving back with my father to where most of my family was. And at that point, and for much of my life, I had a lot of aunts and uncles. So my father had quite a few siblings. They had remained, when they came from Russia in 1912, they just somehow, even though they came so early on, they remained very traditional, both religiously traditional, and also what they formed was essentially a really great, very old time Russian Jewish extended family, mostly based in the Boston area, although with some relatives in LA too. So I moved into that, and I moved into we moved in with one of my aunts. My uncle had died a few years before, and my room was my uncle's library. I moved into a room of Yiddish and Russian books. Literally, that was what was on the walls. And and that whole immersion in that whole world, which also was in part an immersion in traditional Yiddishkayt. When I say traditional Yiddishkayt, I mean the frum world. So I really grew up with a foot in the freie Welt, as we say, the so-called secular world, and the frum world, which to me is gives me a very rich. I'm very grateful for both of those things.
So wait, one.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
One question at that point, because I'm just realizing, because you have this wonderful Badchin voice, right? Which I think, which to me is a bridge to another world. Like you really bring. And is that what did you learn that, or did you witness Badchins, like those tumblers at weddings who doing the toast while you were part of this frum world in Boston? No, not yet.
No, because the Badchanische tradition, other than in the Hasidic world, that really didn't come to the United States, or it did, but certainly by the Second World War, even by the 1930s, it wasn't really practiced so much anymore in North America. What I did hear was, of course, a lot of people davening, laning, reading the Torah, and just the whole Yiddish and Jewish mode of discourse and of public discourse, of people maybe reading poetry or singing songs and so forth. So that when I heard Badchonim, especially on the old 78 recordings, in like wedding reenactments that were recorded on 78, it was like, oh yeah, of course, was all very familiar. And of course, klezmer, what we now call klezmer music, which was that was literally familiar, not only from events like weddings and so forth, but from hearing those old recordings when I was a kid on the Yiddish radio, both in LA and in Boston. So it was that the entire kind of cultural ambience and vibe that was, all to me was all those elements were of a piece. And the other thing that in particular, connecting both with my family in Boston and also with the setting in places where we had real winter and so forth, was connecting with Eastern Europe. And first connecting with, all the tales of Eastern Europe that I grew up with. And then eventually going there, as you mentioned, I went to Yugoslavia for the first time when I was 16 years old. I mean, Yugoslavia being the most accessible part of what we could call Eastern Europe. For Americans in those days, in 1970. And then I went back and lived there when I was a late teenager, 18, 19. And eventually, by the time I was 20, I went to Poland for the first time, in 1974. So again, this is part of a whole kind of many streams coming together.
What brought you to Poland in 1974? Did you go to research, or was it just what was going on?
No, I was, before I answer that, I'd like, Lisa, whoever's running our little StreamYard performance here today, could you make Aaron and I the same
Balance.
size?
There you go. There we go.
Phew. Right.
So yeah, so you get to why do you go to Poland in '74?
I was gonna say, I felt like I was talking with Fievel Mauskowitz, but actually I went to Poland in '74 because I was a musician with the Polish American folk music and dance group in Boston called Krakowiak, which my friend Jasz Jawanowski was his mother was the choreographer, and he said, come play with the group. If you come play with the group for 6 months, and we'll take you on our the tour of Poland that we do every 2 years. So that was remarkable to do that, and to kind of, especially having lived in Yugoslavia and then getting to Poland and seeing, well, this is part of a very familiar cultural sphere, partly because of the Yugoslav experience for me, but also because I was half an hour from the airport on a bus with, full of mainly Polish American high school students from the Boston area and some of their parents. When and it was June, it was lush, it was green, the trees were, drooping with cherries and plums, and we're out in this, incredibly beautiful countryside. There were dark clouds, and I was suddenly struck with the fact that this is not Yugoslavia. This is not kind of a place that's kind of like or near the place where we come from as Yiddish Jews. This is the place, and it's the place where the Holocaust, so much of it was perpetrated. That was true for Yugoslavia too, but this was the land, and suddenly it was, in part it was full of Jewish ghosts for me, and in part it was like, wow, it's it's just so incredibly beautiful too.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar sensation when my wife and I first went to Eastern Europe, and we ended up in the town of Ivya, which had been part of Poland, which is now in Belarus. And I saw Tamar Rogoff's piece that she did, which was the thing that inspired me to create Yiddishkayt. So I know how that kind of a journey can really bring out parts of ourselves as American Jews that we don't even know are there. It's just, when you were just talking about the landscape, I was thinking of all these different songs that the anyway. So, but you go back to Los Angeles, and what's interesting for me about what happens there is that you create your own, you start doing klezmer in Los Angeles at a point when because you are part of the klezmer revival, which starts in the 70s. And I think that's such an interesting part of our history. When I first discovered it, I didn't know about klezmer music, honestly. Growing up in the shul, we did kind of folk songs and partisan songs and lullabies, but klezmer and the whole thing was not really part of it. And I had to discover it through you guys, people like you at Capella, but you did something even earlier in LA than Capella. So just tell us a little bit about that and how you stumbled why did you start that? Why did you say let's play Yiddish music?
Yeah, well, okay, so it's a great story because I was at the time, so 1970, end of 1976, 77, I was living in a big wooden house on one of the walkways on Paloma Avenue in Venice.
So beautiful.
Together with Mark Simos of, some people out there will know him, Mark Simos of old time fiddling, Irish music, songwriting, now professor of music at, professor in songwriting at Berklee College of Music in Boston for quite a few years. So, and again, I had, having come to this through my deep involvement with music of Yugoslavia, the Balkans, and Eastern Europe in general, which does go back to my childhood too. So in 1976, Mark goes to the American Folklore Society meetings in either Philadelphia or Baltimore, and the annual conference. Comes back saying, I met some people there into really interesting stuff. I met a woman named Barbara Kirschenblatt Gimblett, and I met two musicians and researchers of music, two guys named Zev Feldman and Andy Statman, and they're playing this kind of stuff called klezmer music, which is it's like it's the old time Jewish, East European Jewish equivalent of and a lot of it's recorded on 78 recordings, like the old Irish and old time and Serbian 78s and that we're into. And when he said that, I was like, klezmer, when I know that word. It's what, first of all, I knew from growing up that it meant a professional East European Jewish traditional musician, and they often were in bands. And also my father used to call me his klezmer. Klezmer my klezmer, because I played music and it's for obvious reasons. So, and then Mark said, hey, I have, they gave me a tape that has about 4 of these old klezmer 78s on one side, and then I had some of them playing, Zev and Andy playing music that they were playing. They were both studying with Karis at the time, Andy in particular on clarinet. And so when Mark put on one of the old klezmer 78s, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I know this music. This is what I know from the Yiddish radio, and one of my uncles was active in Yiddish radio in Boston too, and he had a big record collection. So suffice it to say that within a few months, Mark and I, together with Stuart Brotman and a whole other cast of characters, including Stuart Menon, Stuart Brotman's old high school friend, drummer Ron Holmes, Barry Fisher, Los Angeles' own, and a clarinetist named Alex Schub who was from New York. And Alex, as far as I know, Alex still lives in LA and maybe even tuning in. But we had formed a very early klezmer group. I mean, we called it the Chutzpah Yiddish Orchestra. It was based at in our big wooden house in Venice, and we began rehearsing in the spring of '77. And played our first gig, I think, was September 1977. We played that was an early one anyway. We played some kind of an 80th birthday party or a 50th anniversary at the Sportsman's Lodge in the Valley. I remember that was instructive too, because in getting to the room in the Sportsman's Lodge, which is a big catering hall in the San Fernando Valley for people that might not know it, we had to pass through some other functions that were going on, and the doors swung open to a room. It was and the sign said like the Goldberg Bar Mitzvah or something like that. And what was playing was Stevie Wonder's "You Are the Sunshine of My Life," which I hadn't been in a Jewish function in a long time then, but the music that was played at occasions like that, it might have even been a wedding, was not Stevie Wonder. And that was like, wow, things have changed. And so we go into like the next room and they're playing all this old stuff that we're just kind of starting to learn as far as the instrumental klezmer tradition goes. The Yiddish songs, of course, I had down. But so we were one of the first klezmer ensembles out there. There was basically at that time, they were the Klezmorim in Berkeley. There was the big Jewish band in San Diego, Ron Roboy's a group that Ron Roboy put together, and Zev and Andy in New York, and us, the Chutzpah Yiddish Orchestra. Yeah.
So then you moved to New York, which is like the natural attraction, I would imagine, especially for what you were doing, because I know LA wasn't supporting Yiddish and that kind of music at that point. And you start actually writing songs in Yiddish. So maybe we could hear Klebzik zu Neuf.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about this song. Give us like a sense of what it's about before you play it.
This was the first song I wrote in Yiddish. I wrote it in 1983, one evening when I was very lonely, and friends of mine were Yiddish friends of mine, because I was part of a circle that of younger people, as we were then, who had all either grown up with Yiddish or were part of the Renaissance of Yiddish and had learned it, who would get together once or twice a month on Shabbos and just have a Shabbos dinner and speak Yiddish with each other. And so there's one of these that I couldn't go to, and or had opted not to go to. So I wrote a song all about community and being together and celebrating Yiddishness, Jewishness, and the importance of community, and also the importance of community in giving us strength to negotiate the challenges of this world, which have certainly not lessened in our lifetime. And so I'll just read the translation of some of the words. Gather together, sisters and brothers, and let us rejoice in Jewishness, by which I mean to say you can rejoice in Jewishness without needing to be Jewish, because that's certainly been the fact that it's not only Jews that are involved at the highest levels in this whole renaissance of Yiddish culture and music. That's very significant. But so enough crying with wounded hearts. We're bound together. We're all bound together like family. And though I've come to you from far across the world, which there was me in New York, having come from far off California, you've become dearer to me than anything. So let's celebrate until the break of day with full bottles of wine and with heartfelt song. But more importantly, the last verses say, in this world that's full of bloodshed and of wrongdoing, it's easy to lose sight of our true goals. And I find myself even falling into that sometimes, until I catch myself and remember that to live truthfully and place such importance in honesty and truth depends on each of us, and that our freedom lies in our own hands. So raise a glass, dear friends, and sing along, and may this song bring courage to our hearts.
Oh, it's a great song for this moment right now. Actually, I think it speaks right to our moment.
Hasn't gone out of style. So let's see here. Give me 1 second. Meine Schwester im Ritterland, ai da 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 ram, da 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 da. Und wir sich freuen, was mir sein Ritterland, ai da 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 da. Genug schön zu weinen, mit Herzen verbundete, ai da 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 ram, da 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 da. Und wir seien alle wie Grübin verbundete, ai da 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 da. Und hier bin ich Menschen achten der Waterwelt, ai da 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 da. Ihr seid mir alle heute teuer noch winken, ai da 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 da. Wo wir sich vergehen bis in weißen Toggerei. Mit hartigen Lieder und mit vollem Laschkiswein. Ay, da 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 dam da 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 dam da 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 dam da 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 dam da 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 dam da 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 dam da 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 ay da 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 Ina Zabel Funa Hedi Sumutekai ay da 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 dam da 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 She's getting to zu Valgen von MSC Silwein ay da 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 In dieser Welt passen Menschen verlunchen sich da 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 Amol wer ich euch so ins Wohnen hab ich sie da 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 Was zu sein Glück lach ist nur in sich gewählt ay da 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 Und unser Mosel liegt in die eigene Hand da 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 Du singt nur das Lied zu Freunde lacht bei den Kerl Und wird schon bemutigt in die Herzen ein den Kerl ay da 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 dam da da dam da da dam da dam ay da da dam da
I always love that. You recorded that with Brave Old World, right?
Yes, we recorded it with Brave Old World and then again with Frank London in with the Klezmer All Stars brass band.
That's just so beautiful. And that was your first song in Yiddish. So how did you then, I mean, because Brave Old World, that's when I first saw you perform. You were with Brave Old World. So what's that story, that origin story? How do you get to that?
Yeah, okay, so Brave Old World was actually founded in 1989. There was a build-up, a kind of proto-Brave Old World that involved both myself and Stuart Brotman and Joel Rubin playing together, really kind of all coming together at Klez Camp, which the Klez Camp started in 1985. That actually took place in the Catskills in New York, as well as Alan Byrne. But Stuart and I and Joel were doing quite a bit together, both on the East Coast some, but also in California. Meanwhile, Joel and Alan Byrne in 1987 had some work playing Yiddish music in Europe, and both ended up living in Berlin from that time on. And essentially, so there was a developed there was the klezmer music scene and so forth, and all of us were in some way or to one extent or another leading lights of it. And if I may say so myself, and we were the people that we wanted to play with, even though we lived in these 3 or 4 different cities. I mean, when we formed. I was in New York, Stu in Los Angeles, Joel, Alan in Boston, had moved to Berlin, and Joel in Berlin too, who had moved there from San Francisco. So and we came together as a kind of the Village Voice called us the first klezmer super group, and that led to a remarkable kind of saga of years of essentially commuting back and forth between North America and Europe, particularly Germany, but not by no means only, to the point where by around the year 2000 we were spending cumulatively cumulatively about 6 or 7 months of the year on the road together. And that the international nature of that experience, and also particularly the involvement with Germany and the engagement with the whole legacy of the Holocaust and of Nazism and of nationalism and xenophobia, etc., in Europe was a large part of what we've been about, and what I think all of us individually and together. Also, the klezmatics are part of that story too. A huge chapter with just remarkable kind of international episodes and kind of tributaries.
So what's interesting is that one of the great songs that you recorded with Brave Old World was Ballad of Chernobyl. And if I understand it, you actually did research back in Los Angeles with the Russian community that led you to the melody. Is that the story?
Yes, in 1988, I was hired by the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs to help create and basically do the field research for, and then be the presenter at a wonderful festival called the Treasures of Fairfax, so celebrating Jewish and
which I attended, and I can tell you in 1988 I had been doing some festivals in LA. I'd just done the Fringe Festival and the Mask Festival, and I saw that and I thought, wow, a whole festival about Jewish and Yiddish, and it's beautiful. And it was really, I have to say, that was another inspiration that you gave me. And Susan was her name, right?
Susan Auerbach,
Susan Auerbach. Thank you, Susan.
Whose concept this was.
Right, which was another precursor for Yiddishkayt. So you and just the idea that it was that this stuff here in LA is valuable was important for me to hear at that point. So you're doing research with the Russian Jewish community that had moved to West Hollywood and to Los Angeles with kind of the Soviet Jewish migration out, right?
Yes, largely, although Ben Basler, who was a Polish Jew who had spent many years in the Soviet Union and so forth, he was a sort of center. I wanted him to be a centerpiece of the festival as well. And some people out there may have known him or know who he was. But yes, so a great deal of my field work was with Soviet Jews, especially in the Fairfax and West Hollywood community. And one of the people I came to and spent time with and recorded and learned from, and then he sang in the festival, was a man named Raphael Zavilion, who was from Odessa, and he sang a broadside, a ballad about the sinking of the Titanic that had been sung by a street singer on the streets of Odessa, which he remembered from 1912 when he was an 8-year-old boy at the time of the sinking of the Titanic. So that's a song that I sang, and we did record it with Brave Old World too. But I had written in 1986, after the nuclear accident in Chernobyl, I had written a song in Yiddish about Chernobyl, because Chernobyl was an important shtetl, an important Hasidic center, and about the irony of a nuclear accident happening in a farmer shtetl, and with the history of Chernobyl and images connected with the Chernobyl Hasidim of fire and of light and so forth. So eventually I adapted the lyrics to that song to the melody of the Titanic ballad that Raphael Zavilion sang. And so his Titanic version was Hertai, liebe Menschen, am Wasserlefi noch im Veyi, oi wo sie passiert im Wattenla. Sorry, those are my words. Well, why don't I just sing the Chernobyl song? Because
and it's just genius, like marrying the Chernobyl words with a ballad that was originally written for the sinking of the Titanic. So
yeah, and I mean, the whole form is it's a tragic ballad kind of form, and that's it's very Ukrainian, also very Ukrainian Jewish. So when I was asked in 91 for the 5th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster to sing the song at the Ukrainian Institute in New York, that's when I set it to this melody.
Mm.
Hertein, liebe Menschen, am Asalefe noch im Wei. Und was sie passiert im weiten Land von Kagabe. Und wir dorten, in mitten Ukraine, ruft sich schein nicht mehr die lichtige Schiene. Ой, als ist in Ordnung, хорошо. Ой, оги зовут Политбюро. Ой, weh, dorten, weiten Land von der Ruhe, dem Stolzen. Und wenn die Lichtige versammelt jetzt die Felder im Wälder grüne und treuriger schöner Ukraine. Und wenn noch das Schrecklichste passiert noch ein Zinder, weil es kränken und starben ein kleinste Kinder. Und wenn noch das Schrecklichste passiert noch ein Zinder, weil es kränken und starben ein kleinste Kinder. Nur was hab ich zu jenem Ort, sie sieden Flecken wohnen dort. Und weh, dorten, auf die Kehle Robis, es tanzen an Eier Malchamovis. Und weh, dorten, auf die Kehle Robis, es tanzen an Eier Malchamovis.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you, Michael. That is just wonderful. So that, I feel like that's about the time when I see you perform with Brave Old World. It's also taking us back. It's around the same time that we see, no, yes, that's the time when we see you on the street and with the video that opened this. Is that around the same 1987?
Yeah, that's the year after. Yeah, I mean that's the year after.
So we're now back. We're like kind of brought the different pieces together, and so I see you perform in the in the Valley at Valley Cities Jewish Community Center in Van Nuys, Sherman Oaks, and then we're at Klez Canada to get Klez Camp West together. And I remember meeting you. You didn't really remember me, but I thought, wow, he's great. And Eli Katz was there also teaching Yiddish that year. And I went to Shula with Mia Katz, his daughter. So I knew Eli and I loved taking class with him. But what I learned from you was this whole concept of Yiddish dance, which I didn't even know existed because I spent my whole childhood, we danced at the Valley Cities Jewish Community Center. We did all kinds of folk dances, but you showed me a whole different style. So I just 1 minute, how did you learn that style? Where did that come from? Growing up, or did you always dance that way? Or
the style I learned growing up, but I also, in the course of all these years, have spent a lot of time focused on researching Yiddish dance and just, watching a lot of people dance. And I mean, this is a serious field of research for a lot of us. I mean, I'm not a dance ethnologist in the sense that I have letters after my name, but there are some people with those qualifications that, really focused on Yiddish dance now. But as far as learning the actual dances, dances like Sher, like Runde, like Bulgar, Freilichs, I mean, and helping bring to life again, I mean, a whole Yiddish dance culture, just like all the other dance cultures of Eastern Europe and of Europe. That was part of my field work, and just spending time interviewing and being with especially older East European born Jews, immigrant generation people, in particular, but not only people from the Soviet Jewish emigration, because that culture was much more alive among Soviet Jews, and I would say remains that way to this day. Then there's the whole Hasidic world and its dance, but that's another story. So that's, and then I began teaching it along with Lee Ellen Friedland, who some of you may know, at Klez Camp in 1985. And then from then on, throughout the world.
Well, it's so interesting because growing up, we did keep Yiddish alive, but we did Israeli dancing, and Israeli dance really kind of buried and kind of subsumed this Yiddish dance. So it was this whole, I hadn't, me and my community hadn't forgotten Yiddish, but we had forgotten Yiddish dance except for the share, which is something we did religiously.
And that's important. That's important.
It was very important.
It's the most Yiddish dance that we have.
Yeah. So then, I travel to Eastern Europe, and I see this piece that inspires me to create Yiddishkayt. I come back to Los Angeles in 1994 with this idea, like, we can create Yiddish and we can bring it to the stage and bring it to people in a public space if we work with artists who are working working with it now. So I make it a point to book you, Brave Old World, and the Klezmatics, because I had met Frank London in Ivya on this Tamar Rogoff piece where he was the music director. And I brought these two groups, you guys, together to Wadsworth Hall as part of UCLA's Performing Arts Series. And it was, I believe, the first time that klezmer music was performed in a public space, not in a Jewish space, in Los Angeles in maybe 20 or 30 years. And so that to me was really important to have both of you there. We sold out 2 nights. I just feel like you helped launch Yiddishkayt 25 years ago. So thank you with that. And it was a great launch. We've got
the feeling is mutual.
We just got about 10 minutes left, and I want to bring us to the present, because you are now living in Scotland, and you're continuing your life as a cultural activist and to inspire us and to create new work. So, what is that, getting out of New York and going to Scotland, and how has that infiltrated your creativity?
Yeah, well, among other, getting out of New York and coming to live in a place where I live, my wife Emily and I live 200 meters from the sea, and in a place full of sheep and cows and fields and woods. That's a incredible pleasure and inspiration of its own. I mean, just the sound of seabirds constantly and so forth. The being around a still vital tradition of Scottish traditional singing, not to mention all the kind of Scottish new takes on Scottish and other Celtic and Isles traditional music happening here and in the Atlantic Isles in general. But the singing tradition is really quite remarkable. And so, I mean, and I've actually been welcomed into that the scene of Scottish traditional singing in a variety of contexts here. When I kind of showed up and said, "Hey, I do speak English and I sing in English, and I've loved Scottish music for a long time, and I could sing in Scots too, but I wouldn't around you. And but I do sing the Yiddish version of this, and so that's been welcomed. As a matter of fact, this year I was invited to do a whole one of the main workshops and kind of concert workshops at the Fife Traditional Singing Festival on Yiddish song. Well, unfortunately, that was canceled because of the pandemic. But yeah, that's been a remarkable thing. So what I was thinking of doing, if you think we have time to do it, still is to sing a Scottish song that was actually written by someone who's right from our basically the adjacent village to here. It's called Generations of Change, and it's about continuity and all in about continuity in traditional life here, or just life here. But that's a whole other foray in a different direction.
Well, we definitely have time, and we'd love to hear it. So let's, and I'd love to, because it brings in your present life, and so yes, let's hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So this was written by a fellow named Matt Armour, who grew up from Pittenweem, which is a couple villages down the coast from us. Where we live here is called the East Nuke of Fife. It's former fishing villages. I say former because the North Sea is very fished out, but there's still a lot of crabbing and lobstering and some commercial fishing. And so the places that are mentioned in the song are not only villages around where we live, but individual farms that most of whom are just up the road from us. We can walk to. Some of the places mentioned in the song we do walk to, and the song is partly in Scots, and Scots, for those that don't know, is the Germanic language of Scotland, not Gaelic. That's different. But the Germanic language of Scotland, that's very close to English, and basically in the same relationship to English as Yiddish is to German. In other words, they don't come from each other, but they have a common ancestor. So Scots and English have a common ancestor. Yiddish and German have a common ancestor in Middle High German, and so forth. So just for a little. Some of the first verse may be a little hard to understand for people outside of Scotland. It says it says my father was a local on the local council here, but he came from a farm, wee farm at Capely, which is right down the coast, and he worked on the land all the days of his life. By the time he had become number 2 in the hierarchy of plowmen, of plowers of the fields here, he figured that he plowed half the farmland around here, and then it says talks about where he was married and buried and so forth, and then I think the rest is plenty comprehensible to people. So Generations of Change by Matt Armour. My father was a bailey frae a wee farm at Capely. He rocked on the ground all the days of his life. By the time he'd made second, I swore he reckoned he'd plowed near on half o' the East Nuke of Fife. He feed on at Randerston, Crawhill and Cleffington, Cambo and Carnby and Kilrenny Mill. At Kingsbarns he married, at Boar Hills was buried, and man, had he lived, he'd be ploughing on still. But those days were his days, and those ways were his ways, to follow the plough while his back was still strong. But those days are past, and the time's come at last, for the wisdom o' age to make way for the young. I was nae for ploughing, to the sea I was going, to follow the fish and the fishermen's ways. Rain, hail, or sunshine, I watch the long run line. Nae man mair contented his hail working day. I long line the flooding grund, Dutch and the Dogger Bank, pulled the big fish frae the deep devil's hole. I side trolled off Shetland, the Faroes and Iceland, in weather much worse than a body could thole. But those days were my days, and those ways were my ways, to follow the fish while my back was still strong. But those days are past, and the time's come at last, for the wisdom of age to make way for the young. My sons, they have grown, and away they have flown, to search for black oil in the dark northern sea. Like oilmen they walk, and like Yankees they talk, and there's no much in common between my sons and me. They've rough-necked on Josephine, Forties and Ninian, Claymore and Dunlin, and Fisher and Ock. They've made fortunes for sure, for in one trip ashore they spend more than I earned in a hail season's work. And this day is their day, and this way is their way, to ride the rough rigs while their backs are still strong. But this day will pass, and the time come at last, for the wisdom of age to make way for the young. My grandchildren are growing, to the school they are going, but the lang weeks of summer they spend here with me. We walk through the warm days and talk of the old ways, of the cornfield, the codfish, the land and the sea. We walk through the fields that my father once tilled, talk with the old men who once sailed with me. Man, it's been awful good, I've taught them all I could, of the past and the present, what the future mocht be. For the morn will be their day, what will be their way, what will they make of their earth, sea and sky? Man, I seen off a change, but it still seems guy strange to look at my world through a young lassie's eyes.
I love the, I feel like there's so much commonality between that and Yiddish song, both in terms of the lyrics and in terms of the musical structure as well. And it's lovely to see that. So up to you. I mean, do you, I want to close with, we have two more songs, but I'm not quite sure if you want to do both of them, or even you want to like do a snippet of Selyotka and like tie Herring to Scotland and Odessa and the States, or should we just? Oh, I think we might have lost Michael, or he's frozen there. We are close to the end of this, and I hope he comes back so we can finish this part of this. If not, oh, we're booting him up. But I do want to, at this point, do a pitch for Yiddishkayt. We do need your support. We are a nonprofit organization, and you can help us out at yiddishkayt.org//support. And we need to keep going, and we luckily have support to go this year through the pandemic, but it's always a struggle, and you can see that how important it is for the kind of work that we're doing. I hope you can. And we're going to be doing, I'm going to be continuing over the course of the next year to do other conversations with other great artists who really contributed to the birth of Yiddish 25 years ago. And Michael is back. Michael, let's maybe close with the song that you wrote for your father. Can't hear you. And we have technical support there.
Unmuting here. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Doesn't always happen. It's like, you know, for some reason my computer quit. So anyhow, yes. So, but I was saying that, of course, the Herring song does bring together all these places, but this song does too. And the song I wrote for my dad, which is mostly in English, some of it's in Yiddish. And the English, everyone I think here will get. I want to say a word about the Yiddish verses. So this song, I started to write it 2 weeks after my father died in 1980. That was 40 years ago. And then I wrote a couple verses and felt I can't possibly sum up my father and, you know, easily in a song, and especially 2 weeks after his death. So I put it aside for 38 years when a friend heard a little snippet of what I'd recorded of it and said, you know, what is this? And inspired me to finish it. So it brings together a lot of what we've been talking about the early experiences, about the natural world, about the heritage I have from my father and my father's family in particular. Brings together the worlds of things we did together, both in LA and in California, also in New England. Brings together the Russia that he came from, a little bit it's in Russian too, and also ultimately the world that I live in here in Scotland. And it's called Heron on the Wing. Let me see here what I want to do with it. I'll do it a little differently. My father was an immigrant from far across the sea. He came from so far away to end his journey here at the edge of a field by a line of maple trees, glowing red and yellow in the autumn of the year. Just gonna switch to a pick here. Born in an empire on the very edge of time, in a small town in the forest, he came into this world. Wheels of war were turning, fires of change were burning. He sailed away into foreign land. Ah, na, 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 Oi, wo je werkt van Iden, nog een lang weg den Mieden. Wir haben Kama, wat in onze zijn Genito. Die Zeit lebt wie ein Poser weg in tiefen Wald rein. In Skier auf und auf die Felder, dunklen die Kumbelo. Oi, nimm dir mit dein Hack und Shake, dein Tatschkalef und Flügerät. Nimm dir mit die Stiefel, die Kojene, die Schwei. Ich dir sein entgegen, noch ich geh dir noch nicht noch auf dein weißen Weg, dem Stil wie Schnee. In the murmur of the maple, in the sighing of the pines, in the wail of the midnight loon,
when the glowing moon hangs low in the ripple of the silent fish that stir the depths below. Your fire is in me everywhere I go. When the ice is out in April, we pull the boat up in the cove. Hear the thunder quake on the summer's lake in the August sunset glow. And when December's icy hand lays bare the wooded grove, your tracks are in the deep and driven snow. Ой, ты же едешь, дальше будешь, так как льется, так и пьется. С кем пойдешься, того и наберешься. Ой, ты же едешь, дальше будешь, так как льется, так и пьется. Что будет, то будет, сегодня надо выпить. Bist mir finster in die Ecken, bist mir lichtig in Gedanken. Nur ein Mensch hast du gewesen, doch war ein Mensch heiß dir gestellt. Kennt sich nur auf mir verlassen, deine Meile sein Gitterei und mit Ehrlichkeit sich irgendwo auf der Welt. Now for all the roads we traveled and the ones we didn't go, for all the tears these many years, this twilight song I sing. And when the fog of autumn drifts upon the rocks below, my heart is like a heron on the wing. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Do 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 do.
Michael, thank you for sharing Sunday evening with us. That was just beautiful, and I really enjoyed getting a little bit of your history and sharing that with the world today.
Listen, thank you. It's such a pleasure to do this with you also, and all of you there at Yiddishkayt, but in honor of our long friendship and common road, this is a pleasure.
And looking forward to more collaborations. We're going to do things like in this context, in this format, and then one day when we can all get together again, we're going to do it live. So thank you, Michael.
Thanks a lot to all of you. And thanks for tuning in.
I want to thank also Lisa Kenner-Grissom and Claire Fester, our staff at Yiddishkayt, along with our executive director, Robbie Adler-Peckerer, for their help in putting this together. Lisa and Michael and I spent actually a couple of hours online together preparing for this and just talking through the history and thinking how to weave the songs in. So thank you. We also, Yiddishkayt has a...
And everyone and Claire as well.
Yeah. And I want you to tune in as well. We have another Yiddishkayt program coming this Thursday, November 19th, 4 p.m. Pacific time, where you, like a lens, where you actually get to hear great experts on film. Two of them, Jim Hoberman and Boris Draluk from the LA Review of Books, speak about this really interesting film, Uptight, and that you can also watch it later, but you can also watch it live and sign up at it's on the screen right there. Again, thank you to Michael, thank you to Yiddishkayt, thank you to everyone, and support our programs. Have a great day, and I hope wherever you are, that the spirit of Michael's music carries you forward.
Amen.